Good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle. I hope you're doing well, and welcome to episode 20 of Crime Story Sunday. This series has taken quite a break, but we are now back. This is 1 week only. I've not yet decided what schedule I'm going to have moving forward with this series, but I hope you enjoy this disturbing case. And this is the case of Robert Hansen, who is known to have sexually assaulted at least 30 women and murdered at least 17. It's disturbing, it's bizarre, it's brutal. This is the case of Robert Hansen. Robert Hansen was born in Estherville, Iowa, on February 15th, 1939. He was the eldest of 2 children, and he was born to an American mother and a Danish father who was called Christian. The family moved from Iowa to California for a few years, from 1942 to 1949. And in 1949, they returned to live in Iowa. Christian bought a bakery which was successful in the town of Pocahontas. As he was growing up, Robert took employment at the bakery, but he didn't enjoy it there. Throughout his childhood and adolescence, Robert Hansen was described as quiet, a loner, and he was painfully shy. And he had a difficult relationship with his domineering father, Christian. And of course, it wasn't helped by the fact that, Robert was working alongside Christian as well as living with him as he grew up. As a young man, due to his social anxiety, and he was also really self-conscious about the severe acne that he developed as a teenager, which left scarring on his face. He felt that he lacked the attention that he wanted, that he craved from attractive girls in the local community. And he grew up hating women, hating the attractive ones, and nursing fantasies of cruel revenge for the times when he craved their attention, but they just ignored him. But in a foreshadowing of things to come, Robert started to practice both hunting and archery, and he became very good at both. And he found refuge in these pastimes, and he went out alone doing his hunting, and as a loner, he just enjoyed that time. But perhaps he enjoyed it a little bit too much. In 1957, Robert Hansen enlisted in the United States Army Reserve, and he served for 1 year before being discharged. He then worked as an assistant drill instructor at a police academy in Pocahontas. And there he began a relationship with a younger woman, and he married her briefly in the summer of 1960. Now, I say brief because actually only a few months after getting married, on December the 7th, 1960, Robert Hansen was arrested for burning down the Pocahontas County Board of Education school bus garage. So the garage in which the school bus was housed, he burnt it down. Arson's an interesting crime because it can have many causes. Sometimes arsonists like to watch the destruction, and they'll stick around and watch the flames rise higher and higher. I don't know whether that's the case for Robert, but the fact that he targeted something to do with the school says a lot for me, that he didn't like school, he felt like outcasted, painfully shy, and wanted revenge. These are not a good combination of traits to have. He served 20 months of a 3-year prison sentence for this crime. During his incarceration, he was diagnosed with manic depression, which we now call bipolar disorder, with periodic schizophrenic episodes. The psychiatrist who made the diagnosis noted that Robert Hansen had an infantile personality, that he'd never really grown up. He was obsessed with getting back at people that he felt had wronged him. And this can be, for relatively minor things or for things that people didn't even know they'd done to him. Like the fact that he harboured fantasies of revenge against all the attractive girls that he couldn't take out. That kind of thing. Hansen's first wife filed for divorce whilst he was incarcerated, and she left. She left the scene. We don't hear from her again. Over the next few years, Robert Hansen was jailed several times for things like petty theft, relatively minor crimes. But despite this, despite his incarceration and despite his continual jail terms, he did marry again in 1963, and him and his wife had 2 children. In 1967, the Hansens moved to Anchorage in Alaska. And in Anchorage, the family settled down, and Robert was fairly well liked by his neighbours. He was a respected hunter, and he set several local hunting records. Again, a horrible foreshadowing of things to come. In December 1971, so 4 years after he moved to Anchorage, he was arrested twice. And this is when his crimes start getting really serious. Arson, burning down a building, is serious, but this is next level serious. The first arrest was for abducting and attempting to rape an unidentified housewife, and then secondly for actually going through with the rape of an unidentified sex worker. He pled no contest to the assault against the housewife, but the rape charge involving the sex worker, which arguably would be the more serious, was dropped as part of the plea bargain. Was that because his victim was a sex worker? We have to ask that question. Anyway, Robert Hansen was sentenced to 5 years in prison. But after only serving 6 months of his sentence, he was placed on a work release program and released to a halfway house. This was a bad idea. For whoever's idea this was bad. Because it didn't help him at all. In 1976, he pled guilty to larceny after he was caught stealing a chainsaw from an Anchorage store. He was sentenced to 5 more years for this, and required to receive psychiatric treatment for his bipolar disorder, which was out of control. The Alaska Supreme Court, however, reduced his sentence, and he was released with time served. So he was getting a relatively easy ride through the prison system. Whether that was through having a good lawyer, or whether that was through just pure good luck, I don't know. But during this time of committing abductions, a rape, and theft, he'd started a murder spree, which went undetected for 8 years. Hansen is believed to have begun killing around 1971, though it would only be in 1983 when all of this, the whole house of cards, came tumbling down for Robert Hansen. When that house of cards finally fell, Hansen is known to have raped and assaulted at least 30 Alaskan women and to have murdered at least 17. We'll get into the details of the women that went missing and were later attributed to Hansen's murder spree. But he was only arrested and charged with the murders of 4. Sherry Morrow, Joanna Messina, Ecultra Annie, whose real name is unknown, Paula Goulding. He was also charged with the kidnap and rape of Cindy Paulson. And it was Cindy Paulson that would very bravely end Hansen's 8-year reign of terror in Alaska. And this is Cindy Paulson's story. On June 13th, 1983, Hansen offered 17-year-old, just 17 years old, Cindy Paulson $200 to perform a sex act. When she got into the car, he pulled out a gun and drove her to his home. There, he held her captive and proceeded to rape and torture her for hours. She later told police that he chained her by the neck to a post in the house's basement. And while she was chained up, he just went and took a nap. Imagine what that felt like, being chained to a post by your neck while your captor is napping. When he awoke, he put her in his car and he took her to Merrillfield Airport, where he told her that he intended to take her out to his cabin. Now, he did have a shack in the Nick River area, and it was accessible only by boat or by bush plane. Cindy Carlson crouched in the back seat of the car with her wrists cuffed in front of her body, and she saw a chance to escape. Because when Hansen was busy loading the cockpit of his plane, which is a Piper PA-18 Super Cub, yes, he had his own little plane. This guy had it all sussed. Bravely, though, when Hansen's back was turned, Cindy crawled out of the back seat, opened the driver's side door, and ran towards nearby 6th Avenue. She escaped. She was so fortunate not to be the 18th murder victim. Cindy Paulson later told police that she had left her blue sneakers on the passenger side floor of his sedan's back seat as evidence that she had been in the car, so she was thinking forward. Hansen panicked and chased her, but Cindy made it to 6th Avenue and managed to flag down a passing truck. The driver, Robert Yult, alarmed by Cindy's dishevelled appearance, stopped and picked her up. He drove her to a local inn and she jumped out and ran inside, and she pled with the people inside to phone her boyfriend at the Big Timber Motel. Robert Yult left her there, but he did call the police to report this barefoot, handcuffed girl that he'd given a ride. When Anchorage Police Department officers arrived at the inn, they were told that Cindy had taken a cab to the Big Timber Motel. Police officers arrived at room 110 of the Big Timber Motel and found her there, still handcuffed and alone. So she was just panicking. She was just trying to get to someone that she thought would protect her. She was taken to APD, Anchorage Police Department headquarters, where she described Robert Hansen. They picked him up as someone who fit Cindy's description. But when questioned by APD officers, he denied the accusation, stating that Cindy was just trying to cause trouble for him because he would not pay her for extortion. He was saying that she was trying to extort him for money. Just absolute nonsense. And here is where he gets away with it again. Because although he'd had several prior run-ins with this police department, it was his meek demeanour. He was like a humble man, along with his alibi from his friend John Henning, kept him from being considered a serious suspect. However, a detective called Glenn Floff of the Alaskan State Troopers had been part of a team investigating the discovery of several bodies in and around Anchorage. The first of the bodies was found by construction workers near Eklutna Road. This body was called Annie by investigators and has still never been identified, because what Hansen would do, he'd target the most vulnerable. He'd target sex workers or runaways, young women. And it's so sad that so many people who run away from home or run away from dangerous circumstances in their youth fall into addiction, sex work, and they're never missed. They're never missed. And this poor young girl, Annie, was never missed and never identified. However, later that year, the body of Joanna Messina was discovered in a gravel pit just outside of Anchorage. And then a few months after that, the remains of 23-year-old Sherry Morrow were discovered in a shallow grave near the Nick River. Detectives believed all three women had been murdered by the same person. So this is where they called in the FBI. And FBI Special Agent John Douglas had a go at profiling a potential offender. Douglas thought the killer would be an experienced hunter with low self-esteem. So he got that bang on, nail on head. Experienced hunter, low self-esteem. painfully shy, just really self-conscious, a loner, socially isolated, and have a history of being rejected by women, would feel compelled to keep souvenirs of his murders, such as victims' jewellery, or sometimes offenders will take locks of hair and things like that. Using this profile, the APD investigated possible suspects until they reached Hansen, who fit the profile and owned a plane, was able to get into these really remote areas. So, supported by Cindy Paulson's testimony and the FBI Special Agent Douglas's profile, the APD secured a warrant to search Hansen's plane, his vehicles, and his home. On October 27th, 1983, investigators uncovered jewellery belonging to some of the missing women, as well as an array of firearms in the corner hideaway of Hansens' attic. Also found was an aeronautical chart, which was pinned on a wall, and there was 37 little X's marked on it. This was on a wall, but hidden behind Hansen's headboard of his bed. Many of these marks matched sites where prior bodies had been found, because what this was a murder map of all the places marked with an X where he'd hidden bodies. When confronted with all of this evidence, Hansen first denied it, but eventually he started to talk, and he started to blame these women, these dead women, many of them teenagers or in their early 20s. He blamed them and tried to justify his actions. However, he eventually did confess to each item of evidence as it was presented to him, so the various items of jewellery, and then there was the murder map. Finally, he admitted that he'd been a spree killer, a serial murderer, attacking Alaskan women starting in 1971. Usually, his victims were between the ages of 16 and 19, although some were in their 20s, and there was the occasional woman who was a little bit older. And this is a list of his victims, and these are in the approximate order of when they went missing. So we've got Beth Van Zanten, who was aged 17. She went missing on December 22nd, 1971. And she was found on Christmas Day, 1971. So she was killed between the 22nd and the 25th of December. Hansen denied killing her, but he's a suspect because where her body was found was marked with an X on his map. Then we've got Megan Emmerich, aged 17, who went missing on July 7th, 1973. And Mary Thill, who was 22, who went missing July 5th, 1975. Both of these have been denied by Hansen, but both X's on his map. We've got Annie, we've already mentioned, has never been identified. She was between roughly the ages of 16 and 25, found July 21st, 1980. She'd been stabbed in the back. By the time her body was discovered in the shallow grave, it had been partially eaten by animals, so identity unknown. Then we've got Joanna Messina, aged 24, who went missing on May 19th, 1980, and was found in July 1980. He admitted to that one. We've got Roxanne Esland, 24, who went missing just a month after Joanna on June 28th, 1980. He confessed to killing her, but her body has never been found. Lisa Futrell, 41, so she was his oldest victim, who went missing on September 6, 1980, was found May 9th, 84. Her body was found just south of the Old Nick Bridge near the river. Sherry Morrow, 23, went missing November 17th, 1981, was found in September 1982. She was found in a shallow grave on the bank of the Nick River. She had been shot in the back. There was no bullet holes in her clothing, suggesting she had been shot while nude and then redressed before being buried. We've got Andrea Altry, 22, went missing December 2nd, 1981. Her body has never been found. He did confess to killing her, but wouldn't say, or maybe didn't remember, where she was buried. Then we've got Sue Luna, aged 23, went missing May 26th, 82, was found April 24th, 1984. She was stripped nude, forced to run through the forest while Hansen hunted her like a wild animal. And then he took his shot. He shot her to death. And then we've got Robin Pelkey, 19. She was found in April 1984. Her identity was discovered only by forensic genealogy. And this was as late as October 2021. Before her identification, she was nicknamed Horseshoe Harriet, but she has been given her real name now. We've got Delyn Frey, 20, found August 20th, 1985. Her body was found by a pilot testing new tyres on a sandbar of the Nick River. Paula Goulding, 21, who went missing on April 23rd, 1983. She was found in September 1983. She was found in a shallow grave on the bank of the Nick River. That was his hunting ground. Again, like others, she'd been shot in the back, but there were no bullet holes in her clothing, suggesting she had been shot whilst nude and then redressed before being buried. Was he hunting these women naked? Was he making them run away and hunting them down? We've got others. We've got Malai Larson, 25, who was found April 1984. We've got Teresa Watson, 22, found April 26, 84. We've got Angela Fedden, who was found April 26, 1984. And we've got Tamara Pedersen, 20, found April 29th, 84. Again, these were found within a specific area near the Nick River, Hansens hunting ground. There's probably more, but those are the ones that are on record. So what happened to Robert Hansen? Well, he was arrested, he was charged. He entered into a plea bargain after ballistics tests returned a match between bullets found at crime scenes, the various crime scenes that had been unearthed during this investigation, and Hansen's own rifle. He pled guilty to the 4 homicides that the police had the best evidence for at the time in 1983. This was Morrow, Messina, Goulding, and Annie, the unidentified girl called Annie. He provided details about the other victims in return for serving his sentence in a federal prison, along with no publicity in the press. Yeah, you're never going to get away with no publicity, son, you're not. Another condition of the plea bargain was his participation in deciphering the markings on his aviation murder map and locating his victims' bodies. Hansen confirmed the police theory of how the women were abducted and hunted, adding that occasionally he'd sometimes let a victim go if she convinced him she would not report him to the police. Hansen showed investigators 17 grave sites in and around south-central Alaska, 12 of which were unknown to investigators until the time that Hansen led them there. There remain marks on his map that he refused to give up, including 3 in Resurrection Bay. Authorities suspect 2 of these marks belong to the graves of Mary Thill and Megan Emmerich, whose bodies have never been discovered, whom Hansen has denied killing. The remains of just 12 of his victims have been exhumed from their disposal site and returned to their families so they could be given a final resting place with dignity and with love. Hansen was sentenced to 461 years in prison without the possibility of parole. So I think that's a decent sentence. Finally, Robert Hansen is where he belongs. He was first imprisoned at the United States Penitentiary Lewisburg in Pennsylvania, but then in 1988 he was returned to Alaska, briefly incarcerated at Lemon Creek Correctional Center. He then went to Spring Creek Correctional Center until May 2014, when he was transported to the Anchorage Correctional Complex for health reasons. And he died on October 21st, 2014, aged 75, at a hospital in Anchorage. He died due to natural causes from lingering health conditions. Yeah, good riddance. What a horrible, horrible man. What a terrifying way to die. Being hunted down, probably nude. What a horrible, horrible man. Have you heard of this case? Let me know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I've been Michelle. I hope you're well, and I'll see you very soon in the next video.